6:36. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. Good morning.
Yes, and welcome back. Let's take a look at today's front pages. And the Times leads with speculation that Jeremy Hunt wants to extend the 5p fuel duty cut for another year.
Oh, let's hope so. The Guardian says Conservative constituencies have been given more cash on average from the Levelling Up Fund than their Labour voting counterparts.
The Mail appeals to the government to cut taxes following claims that the economy has turned a corner.
The Eye has reports the EU is keen to see Sir Keir Starmer become Prime Minister.
And finally, the Mirror focuses on the disturbing case of 3 Met officers accused of possessing child abuse images.
OK, let's go through the papers in a bit more detail with the Deputy Editor of Spite, Fraser Myers, and broadcaster Liz Kershaw. Morning to you both.
Morning.
Let's kick off with the Mirror, Liz, should we? And looking at these, of course, we've got to be very careful how we talk about it, but 3 police officers accused over child abuse images.
Yeah, one committed suicide, didn't he, in Buckinghamshire, just the day before he was due to present himself to be charged at a police station, so obviously he couldn't face what was going to happen. The other 2 have been retired 10 years, so that's 2013. The offences are said to have been committed not that long ago, 4 or 5 years ago, so they're out of the force when they were allegedly carrying out these searches on Google, etc., and appalling images of children. So they're not active police officers. So you could go, phew, I feel like I trust the police now, because GBNEWS has done a poll, hasn't it, on public trust in the police. I just think more and more stories come out all the time about misogyny and violence and sex crimes committed by police officers, not referring to this case, but other cases have been convicted, proven, and sentencing. And you just have to wonder about the calibre of some of the people that are allowed into the police with very scanty checks. I mean, the Met Police are going back now, aren't they, and checking on people's criminal records. You'd think that was a kind of
that should have been done.
Foundation, yeah.
I just think it's what's very difficult with all of this. I mean, you've got to root out the bad apples.
Yeah.
But you've got to be very careful.
Yeah.
What it doesn't do is taint the vast majority who are excellent police officers.
Yeah, I agree. It must be miserable if you're a genuinely sincere, professional, law-abiding policeman and your colleagues are going down like flies. But I do think that, and it was mentioned with the case of the Metropolitan Police this week, people have to... There's also a feeling that nobody reports anything. You know, if you think something's unacceptable, people are being encouraged to whistleblow. It's very difficult, especially some of the stories I've read this week from female police officers who try and report what's happened to them. Some of them have even been driven out of their jobs because of it. So the culture has to change, where it's just not acceptable. And like the guy this week that was convicted of many offences, sexual offences, and I won't repeat his nickname, but if you worked alongside a colleague who had a nickname like that, you'd think, oh, maybe there's something not quite right about this bloke, wouldn't you?
Same with Wayne Couzens, wasn't it? He had a similar sort of nickname. I mean, like you say, it does seem to be deeply ingrained in the culture.
It's hindsight, isn't it?
I think historically it's been a very macho male career, and the more women that are involved and the more women that can have the confidence to highlight what's going on, the better. But it's been a very much, and also it's all about power, has been discussed this week. If you give somebody authority, it can go to their heads.
Yeah.
And also my dad, I remember as a kid, he always had a thing. He said, you know, policing, it attracts a certain type of person. You know, they want to have authority over their peers, over the general public. So I think the recruitment process needs seriously looking at.
And I mean, we could hear a lot more now. I mean, like you say, the more women and men that come forward, then, more stories will come out. And I think 800 officers are being investigated at the moment by the Met, 1,000 claims of sexual abuse. Is it time that we reform the Met, or at least look into this misogynistic culture?
I mean, the Met is clearly a failing institution. I mean, there's barely a day goes by without some new horror story, some new police officer found to have committed horrendous crimes, or simply failing to tackle crime. That's, that's another important aspect of this. A lot of people feel as if, if you get something nicked, a police officer is not going to take any interest in it. So there's that side of it too. So the public are seriously being let down here.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people would agree. Look, let's move on, though, on to the Express, Fraser, and hopes for the economy. We're winning the inflation battle, says the front page.
I mean, the front page is pretty extraordinary. I mean, it's really quite triumphalist. It's like, get the champagne corks out now. And the actual, inflation figures, they've gone from, 10.7% to 10.5%. So I wouldn't get too excited too early.
But moving in the right direction, as the DJs would say.
Yeah, there's some positive noises that, the Bank of England chief saying he reckons inflation could come down quite quickly by the middle of the year. But we're still forecast to have a recession. So,
Well, they keep saying that, but none of the figures have...
No.
There was a slight, uptick this winter because of the World Cup, which surprised people.
Because the Bank of England was saying we'd be in recession by now.
By now,
we don't appear to be.
We don't. Well, it's not looking good. It's still, growth is still very slow. We're not. We should be really growing quite quickly by now after the pandemic is over. Hopefully the energy crisis will abate slightly, although that could go on for a bit longer. I think the other problem is that the government itself doesn't really have much of a plan. So that's the other theme of a lot of the papers. There's no sense of direction from Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt of how to grow the economy. It's purely about managing the kind of fiscal situation, which is no good for the long term.
Well, maybe with the Mail, Liz, saying they're jumping the gun a little bit, aren't they? Saying, well, the economy's on the turn, so let's lower taxes. Well, not yet.
The Governor of the Bank of England was a lot more optimistic yesterday as well, and the pound's been going up this week. And I would also say, let's put it into perspective. I tweeted this week a list of having done a bit of research, a list of the inflation rates in the 27 countries in the EU, because it's all very well, as I think you were mentioning earlier, just everybody blames our government, and I'm not making a party political point here. I'm simply saying, and the thing that shocked me was the number of people, I'm just checking the figures now, the number of people on Twitter who thanked me for sharing these stats because they had no perspective at all. If you live in this country, it's not widely reported what's going on elsewhere, and you get the impression that we're tanking and the rest of the world is doing well. Okay. Yeah. So I just put in where the UK is. I couldn't fit all 27 countries and statistics into my one tweet, but for instance, inflation rates for 12 months to the end of November, that's the most up-to-date there was for Europe. Now, I'd also like to emphasise that when we say there's an inflation rate of 10.5%, it's for 12 months. Prices aren't going up 10.5% a month.
No.
It's often represented to scare people watching it on, thinking, oh my God, 10.5% just in November. No. Anyway, across the rest of Europe, just briefly, this is when we were at 10.7% in November. The average across the EU of the 27 was 11.1. So hello. And then above us, I won't go through all the numbers, look at me Twitter. Hungary, 23.1%. And then these are all the Northern and Eastern Europe countries. Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, 21 point odd. Czech Republic, 17. Poland, 16. Croatia, we're now down to 13. Italy, 12.6%. Germany, 11.3%. Netherlands, 11.3%. we're all in this together because of the external forces upon us, which is war and you know, consequent food and gas shortages and increasing prices. So
yeah, well, we are. But I have to say, as much as I would love taxes to be reduced, I really would.
Yeah, it cost me £5 just to Euston the other day.
But I don't know if now is the time. I think we might have to wait 6 months or so before we even get a look in on that, which is probably the sensible way forward.
It's a bit scary, as Fraser pointed out, when the economy avoided recession by increasing by 0.5% because we had a football match and everybody bought beer. That's hardly, you know, manufacturing, is it? It's hardly a solid base.
Well, no, but if it works, it works.
Gets cash into the economy, yeah. Right, Fraser, let's go to you, shall we? This has caused a bit of controversy this week, hasn't it? The levelling up cash and the way that it's been divvied out has been called the Hunger Games by some of the papers. Tell us a bit more about this.
Well, so there's accusations that certain Tory seats, particularly Tory marginal seats, ones that they are looking to retain at the next election, have been getting more levelling up funding than sort of equivalent Labour seats that are as equally deprived. I suppose there's a sort of inevitability of this kind of pork barrel politics, if you like, when you have this kind of scheme where people, different towns and cities have to they put their projects in and they have to bid for the levelling up funding. It's also, you know, the levelling up agenda seems to have been quite stalled, or, I mean, does it mean anything is the other thing. A lot of people don't actually understand what it's driving at. It seems to be a kind of slogan in search of a policy. So I remember reading the Levelling Up white paper, and it seems to include everything from things you might expect, like new shiny research centres, which obviously could drive growth, to things like cleaning up chewing gum and graffiti, which is a nice thing, but it's not going to be a driver of economic growth, and, you know, it's not going to solve our kind of problems of regional inequality. And we do have real problems. You know, we're basically, the difference between the north and the south of England is getting to be like East and West Germany after the fall of the wall.
But it's also, there's in one of the papers today that claims that if you're going to get more levelling up cash if you're a Tory voting area than you are a Labour vote. Now, that seems almost counterintuitive, actually, because if you want to convince people to vote for you, then...
Or are they trying to pay back the dividend of all those new voters? You know, the people who trusted the Tories for the first time, a lot of them in those kind of red
Either which way you're going to lose on that sort of game, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. You can't bribe people to vote for you anyway. That'll never work.
Well, one of the winners in this is Wigan. And nobody's ever going to win a seat as a Tory in Wigan. I mean, that's one of the safest Labour seats ever. And Morecambe, which is why I got a visit yesterday, they've had plenty of money. Blackpool's getting a new university.
Morecambe's desperate.
Yeah, but also people say, oh, it's going to the southeast. Well, yeah, but it's going to places like Margate, the Isle of Sheppey, Folkestone, Hastings. They're very deprived. They're places where people have been sent by the system, dumped, you know, in houses of multiple occupancy on benefits, and they're really run down, the piers falling down, the housing. If you go to Margate, which is supposed to be the shining star now of gentrification, go beyond the seafront where all the art galleries and vintage shops are, and bijou cafes, and it's just, you know, bleak and dismal. So it's not fair to say, oh, we only need the money up north.
No, it's not fair, as you say.
I think the coastal towns, wherever they are, north or south, are some of the most needy,
They are.
Blackpool, I was going to say, Blackpool is like the most deprived town in the UK. And if you're a man from Blackpool, you will have a life expectancy 9 years below the UK national average. So the kind of imperative to sort this out, to deal with our inequalities, is real. It's just a shame that sort of levelling up, or what passes for it, is just not going to get us there.
Well, no. We've got to leave it there. Liz, Fraser, thank you both very much indeed. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on.